Hello, everyone. This week I am talking with Denise Whitlatch. You may have seen her story and her son Dakota popping up on your NASCAR Twitter recently or such. But anyway, Denise, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
That's awesome. I really enjoy. I tell people that really the purpose of this is to show that everyone involved in racing has a story. Whether you are a race car driver, a car owner, a track owner, or even just a fan. And as I was telling you before we started, that I've seen you and Dakota pop up on my Twitter a lot over the years, but really didn't know y'all's story. So I really appreciate you taking some time out to do a little interview and kind of talk about racing as well as tell y'all's story. So thank you for joining us.
Not a problem.
So I guess jumping into it, you yourself seem like you've been a race fan for years and years. What was kind of your introduction to NASCAR as well as Dakota's introduction to NASCAR?
Well, like you said, I've been a NASCAR fan for a long, long time. I grew up, when Jeff Gordon was a driver. He was my driver, and then when Dakota was born, he was in the hospital, and we would just turn on this TV just for sound. And then as he got older, I think it was about 3, he decided that he liked fast cars, and he fell in love with Bobby Labonte, the number 18, and he just stuck with it, and he just kept going, and his love of NASCAR has grown tremendously ever since.
That's awesome. So for people who follow y'all's Twitter, you on social media, you'll see that Dakota's met a few drivers. Over the years, has there been any drivers that have stood out as like y'all's favorite as far as meeting them?
I think his all-time favorite meeting driver would probably be Kyle Busch. I mean, he is a downhearted guy who, yeah, maybe on the track people don't like him because of the way he drives with his aggressiveness, but off the track, Kyle is kind, he's sweet, he's very nice, he's very caring, he's always showed high interest when you're talking to him. He's not one of those guys that hurries up and signs something and scoots you along the way. He'll talk to you for the longest time, and even though there's other people waiting, he always paid attention to Dakota and what he had to say, and he just really made us feel really comfortable, and it really touched Dakota, and he's always said, "Mom, I like him, and he's going to be my driver."
That's awesome. Like you said, I feel like Kyle gets such a bad rap for who he is on the track. But you hear so many stories of Kyle just being the stand-up guy where it comes to taking the time to talk with a fan, or whatever the case is. And something's always kind of stood out to me about Kyle is it just seems like it's not even just signing an autograph. It's actually taking the time to thank his fans for being his fans, and I guess putting up with some of the antics that happen on the track, or the grief they get for other fans when they see you walking around in the 18 or the M&Ms on y'all shirts or hats.
Exactly, because we have taken some grief. There was an incident in 2009 when we were in Daytona,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the race at the finish between Tony and Kyle, and they took each other out, and Dakota had on his Kyle Busch shirt, and Dakota started to cry when the wreck happened, and some guy turned around and called my son a ball baby, and I was like, oh, that's not going to happen. He's 5 years old, and you're calling him a ball baby because his favorite driver just wrecked. And obviously the guy behind me was a Tony fan. But yeah, I'm like, that is just totally uncalled for, and they were blaming Kyle for everything.
Yeah.
Of course, then my husband turns around and says, "You will never call my son a ball baby." And I thought, well, we're going to get kicked out of this racetrack before we even get to finish the race.
Yeah, what I've learned is that when it comes to like Tony Stewart or even like Chase Elliott's fan base, they are ruthless when it comes to the other drivers, other fans out there.
Oh yeah, and we have met Tony personally, and he, and there again, off the track when he's not driving, he's the nicest guy in the world.
Well, that's awesome. So, yeah, like I said, I've seen y'all a little bit of bits and pieces of y'all stories over the years. But can you tell us a little bit about Dakota's story?
Dakota was born with hypoplastic left heart, meaning he only has a half a heart. His left ventricle of his heart didn't develop, and he has endured 6 open heart surgeries in his 20 years of life. In his 3rd surgery, he had a really bad time. He had to be put on life support. His surgery didn't take very well, so they were worried that he wouldn't make it through the night, so we just put him on life support to let his heart rest. And in that meantime, he had 2 strokes while he was on life support. And then with that also happening, he coded, so he had to be revived twice. And as a parent, you never want to hear those signs of the code blue going off and everybody rushing to your child's room. And Dakota survived it. They waited 5 days, went back in and did another open heart surgery. And we were in the hospital for that surgery for 90 days. We lived in the hospital. We never hardly left the hospital, my husband and I didn't. We were here through Thanksgiving, through Christmas, through New Year's. We got out shortly before Valentine's Day. And it was really scary because we didn't know whether or not we were going to come home with our child. We brought him in, but we didn't know if we were going to get to take him home because he'd had a stroke. He never recovered right away. He was awake, but he would just stare at us. And to have your child just stare at you with glassy eyes and not talk to you, and just you couldn't hold him or nothing, was the worst feeling for a mother and a father. But then, we are very spiritual people. We put everything in God's hands. We prayed. We had a lot of prayers going out, and it was Christmas Eve. We had just laid down to bed, and my husband had told Dakota good night, and then I had just fallen asleep, and then all of a sudden my husband smacks me on the arm, and he said, "He's awake." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "He just asked me if he missed Christmas." Dakota had, in a soft-spoken voice, rolled over and said, "Daddy, did I miss Christmas?" And it was like the most joyfulest thing in the world that could ever happen on Christmas Eve, to have him come back and out of this coma stage where, we were told he was going to be a vegetable. He wouldn't walk. We'd be lucky if he would ever talk again. And those are the worst words you ever hear from a doctor.
Yeah.
And we were like, my husband looked at the doctor, and she was a neurologist, and he said, "No, we will walk out of this hospital. We don't care how long it takes." He goes, "We'll take it to a higher power." And she said, "Well, you can take it to whatever doctor you want." And my husband says, "I'm not taking it to a doctor. I'm going to take it to my Lord and Savior." And she says, "Well, I don't believe in that." And I was just like, "Okay." And I turned around and with tears in my eyes, and I said, "Well, she'll be surprised because we're going to get this." And it was in February that he didn't walk out of here, but he got pushed out in a wheelchair, but he had to be retaught to walk again, to eat, to go to the bathroom, because he was already potty trained. He was 3 when that surgery happened. And so he had to relearn everything. It put him behind in school. So he just excelled very well. Once we got home, he did physical therapy, and as he went on in life, he had to have a pacemaker because when his heart got out of rhythm, so we had to endure a pacemaker. During his ECMO, when he was on life support, they collapsed his lung, so he also lost a lung. So being with just a half a heart, now he has 1 lung, so he's on oxygen full time. And so we have a pacemaker. We were good for a while. We would just come in for routine checkups and everything and do catheterizations to check the vessels and make sure his heart was functioning all right. And then in 2016, Dakota we were doing something one night, and he goes, "Mom, my belly's leaking." I said, "Your belly's leaking?" I said, "Are you sure it's not sweat?" He goes, "No, it's not sweat." And so I looked at it, and he was leaking from, like, the side of his belly, one of his pores.
Wow.
And so my husband and I talked, and so we called the doctor, and I put a piece of gauze on it, and we came up to Iowa City, and they, admitted him, and were doing tests, and they were like, "Well, we're really not sure, but it looks like chylothorax." And I was like, "Okay, we've dealt with that before. We put chest tubes in, and it just extra fluid in the system."
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going on. Well, they're doing all these tests, and they said, "Well, there are things that heart kids can get. Not every heart kid gets them, because Dakota's a single ventricle Fontan revision child called PLE, which is protein losing enteropathy." And I was like, "Okay, thank you, Internet." So here we go. I'm Googling. And it attacks your lymphatic system in your belly, which makes his belly fill up with fluid that makes him look like I describe it as being pregnant all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, big time. And his belly would just fill with fluid. And so that was another hurdle. Well, when that hurdle hit in 2017, we brought him in because he was just filling up rapidly. They did some testing, and they looked at us, and they said, "Dakota, we're going to take your mom and dad. We'll be right back." And every time they say that to us, and they put us in a room, I said, "This is not good."
Mm-hmm.
The doctor set us down, and they said, "We don't know how much longer." I said, "Are you telling me my kid's going to die?"
Mm-hmm.
They're like, "Yes." And I'm like, "Really? We just turned 15 years old, and you're going to tell me my kid's not going to make it to his 16th birthday?" And they're like, "There's a 99% chance he's not going to make it." They're like, "So you need to do everything that you want to do with him, and just make his life for the best you can.
Mm-hmm.
Live to the fullest. We're going to do all we can." And as a mother, I'm like, "You're darn right you're going to do all you can, because I'm not giving up on my kid, and
Mm-hmm.
you darn well better not." So they put a drain in his tummy to try to drain off all this fluid. He came in the hospital that time at 130 pounds. They took off 30 pounds of fluid while we were here. And Dakota always teased and said, "Well, time to tap the keg." And I'm like, "Really?" I mean, he puts a smile
Mm-hmm.
and makes everything fun, no matter what it is. And he was 15 years old at the time. He was like, "I feel like they're tapping a beer keg, Mom." And so the nurses and the doctors are all laughing. And, he has to lighten up the spirit, because when you're in the hospital that long, you got to.
Yeah.
So we would come in every 3 to 4 weeks and get a tummy drain. They've called a hospital in Philadelphia, that does this all the time. They talk to our doctors, because we really didn't want to go out to Philadelphia to have this done.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully for the Internet and social media, I found another heart mom whose son had been doing this. So she coached me through all this. And so we were doing that every 3 weeks. We would pull him out of school. We would get his tummy drained. He would probably miss a week of school, because it would just drain his system. It's almost like when people get COVID, how tired they are now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. It would just drain him. So we would do that weekly. Every 3 to 4 weeks, we were getting drained. And so we asked him. We weren't going to tell him. My husband and I talked about it. And then we finally told him. We told my parents first. And I put it out on social media. And we asked him what he wanted to do. And he said, "Well, I want to do all these things, Mom, but I really want to go to the 600 in May."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Okay, so this is 2017. It's April 10th, and the Charlotte May race is in a month." I'm like, "Okay." And I wasn't worried about school. He was in 8th grade at the time. School was the least of my worries.
Yeah.
So that all came through there again, the racing community made it happen. They sent us to Charlotte. We got hooked up with a wonderful person that works for the Speedway. And at that time, the World of Outlaws were down there. So he got to endure the World of Outlaws and the Xfinity race and the NASCAR race. And that's when he met, again, all those drivers, again, who had seen him once before that were in Xfinity that had moved up. They had seen him. They remembered him. They heard his story. They knew he was sick. And it was just phenomenal. The Charlotte area had done everything. Somebody paid for our hotel, and one of the guys down there had, I don't know how they did it or who actually it was, but got him a whole basket of Kyle Busch t-shirts and hats, and I think he came home with 13 hats and 21 t-shirts that year.
Wow.
And so we continued that streak, and then in September of 2017, we came in for another checkup, and his numbers weren't improving, and they said, you need to do the things you don't want to do, and you need to go pick out the casket. And I said, I need to what? No, I'm not picking out a casket. They're like, well, you need to make everything finalized. And I'm like, I am not finalizing my son's life. I'm not picking out a casket. I'm not picking out music. I'm not calling the funeral home. Not doing it. We came home and, we did things Dakota wanted to do, which at that time it was in September, so dirt racing was finishing up in our area. But we still had NASCAR on TV. Football, he liked football, so we came up here to the university to a couple games. We went to Kansas. He likes the Jayhawks. We went to a football game down there, and we didn't know what the summer was going to bring. We still came up for more drains. 2018 came. Dakota's still here. We went back to Charlotte to celebrate Dakota being here. Then again, he got, world-round treatment again. And got to see the dirt race and the truck or the Xfinity and NASCAR, and he got to. That's the year he went to the All-Star race, and that's the year he told Kyle Busch about his drivers that were crap. And he just makes friends wherever he goes. And we were standing on the concourse, and some guy came up and said, "Here, buddy, have an Earnhardt or a Richard Petty hat," and it was signed. Just gave it to him.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, it could just be a random person, and they will give Dakota something. And sometimes Dakota will say, "Oh, no, thank you. You don't have to do that." And he's like, "Nope, we want to." And Dakota's like, "Mom," and I'm like, "Buddy, if they want to, then just accept it." Because he won't. If he's like, "Mom," and I'm like, "Buddy, it's totally on them. If they want to give it to you, then you accept it."
Yeah.
And it's just, that's what racing family is. And then 2019, we went back. And, well, then COVID hit. Well, that put a damper on everything. And 2021, Dakota graduated high school. And the doctors still, to this day, will look at us, and we were sitting with the doctors. I mean, his cardiologist cried with us that day he told us the news. And we were all sitting in the exam room, and they're like, I told the doctor, this is one of our palliative care nurses. She's like, I looked at the cardiologist and I said, "Can you explain it? Can you explain why Dakota's still here?" And they're like, "We have no explanation." And of course, they all know who we are, and we're like, "We do." And Dakota goes, "Yeah, I do, because God's not done with me." And at that moment, that has been Dakota saying ever since all this has started was, "God's got this." And so a friend of ours had bracelets made up that say, "God's got this." And it's just phenomenal that he's here, and we give all of our love to God for Dakota being here. And there has been so many times that Dakota could have went to be with Jesus, but he didn't. He gave him to us 20 years ago, and he's not done with him. And I feel that every time we go somewhere, because there are kids, even little kids. Yeah, Dakota is 20, but he looks like he's about 12. But there are little kids that will just come up and start talking to him, just because. Or I've gotten comments. We've been at the store, and they'll say, your son just has a smile that I was having a bad day, but he said hi to me.
Yeah.
And it just made my day better. And I'm like, as a parent, that makes me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been, even at the store or even at the hospital, we were here, well, this is pre-COVID, but we were here with Dakota, and we were walking the hallways, and there was a lady in one of the rooms just sitting there, and she had been crying, and we just, walked in and said hi, and how are you? And she just said hi, and then we walked out, and then all of a sudden Dakota's like, stop. And we're like, what's the matter? He's like, I got to go back. And I'm like, you got to go back? He's like, yeah, I need to go pray for that lady.
Mm-hmm.
And we got in there, and we said, ma'am, we don't mean to bother you, but our son felt the need that you needed to be prayed for. And she just started to cry. She's like, nobody has ever done that. And she goes, to let alone it be a child.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, he's 18, but okay. I mean, she just started to cry, and she just opened up. I mean, we were sitting in there with her. Her child was sick, but her
mm-hmm.
husband was at home with the other two, and she was alone. But
Yeah.
she goes, I have never felt anybody want to do that for me. And I'm like, this is our son.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when we go to church, he doesn't pray for himself. He prays for others, whether it be somebody in our church, somebody I read about on social media, a race car driver. If someone got in a wreck, when Kyle got in his wreck in 15, he was praying every day. He goes,
mm-hmm.
Mom, is that weird? I'm like, no, that is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
That is your talent, your gift from God, is to pray for others. And it's just phenomenal what he does for others, that he doesn't even worry about himself when he needs prayer. But every night before we go to bed, he's like, Mom, we can't forget to pray. I'm like,
mm-hmm.
we don't forget to pray, buddy.
On that note, there's so many people out there that are facing these obstacles that just seem like they're too much, and people are in a state of hopelessness. As someone who has just gone through just hearing so many things that just parents do not want to hear, what advice do you have for those out there who may be feeling that they're kind of at the end of their rope, or just they don't know where to find hope from?
There have been so many times I felt like we were at the end of our rope. I mean, when we got that news, we went home, and I wanted to scream and shout outside, and I did. Thank goodness we live in the country.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't give up. I mean, I know everybody says, oh, it's just so much easier to give up. But it's not. When it's your kid, your spouse, or whatever, when you see the drive, especially in your kid's eyes, when you look in your child's eyes and you know that they have that drive to keep going and what their life could be, you just have to fight that fight. I mean,
mm-hmm.
we have fought so many battles in 20 years, and we will still fight. I don't care what the news is. You just go with it. You take it and you listen, but you take it one day at a time. You try not to think of all the bad things, and I'm guilty of that. I admit it. I thought about those things. What
mm-hmm.
if? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if this did happen? And then I just have to say, stop, because you can't look at it that way. You take it the day it is, and then you go on to the next day, and then you fight that day, and then you go to bed, and you get up and do it again. You just keep fighting, and if you're religious, you pray about it. Yeah, they always say God can only gives you what you can handle. He must think we can handle a lot, because
mm-hmm.
we've been doing this a long time. And I wouldn't change it for the world.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't change anything. I mean, Dakota, he gave us a gift
mm-hmm.
20 years ago, and I wouldn't change it.
Yeah.
I mean, I sit back and I'm like, okay, I have Dakota, and I see everything that he's done and everything he's endured in his 20 years. And there are people that may never get to do that.
Yeah.
And then I get people telling me, you're tough parents.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but we may look tough, but we crumble.
Yeah.
And I said, I get it from him because and I'm supposed to put God and Jesus first, and I try to do that, but I put Dakota over myself 99% of the time. You know, I am the mother that I will eat last. I will fix his plate. I will do everything. He is first. When it comes to supper time, my food will be cold before I even sit down to eat because I make sure he is taken care of first.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'll tell me, Mom, I'll get it. I'm like, no, you're my son. I'm supposed to take care of you. And he's like, but I'm a big boy. I'm like, you're 20.
Yeah.
But you still need help. And that is why I'm here.
Yeah.
I said, you are mine, and I'm going to help you. And it doesn't bother me to eat last. It doesn't bother me to eat cold food or drink cold coffee.
Yeah.
Because that is my job, is to take care of him and put your kid first. Because that, to me, that is what you do, and you just don't give up on anything. You just don't.
Mm-hmm.
That is how I look at things. And we have been, and it's sad to say, we have been in a situation where we have heard it from the bad end, where there was a child that had passed, was getting ready to pass, and we heard the parents say, well, we can have another one.
Yeah.
And I'm like, excuse me? And that was before the privacy policy where you just were divided by a curtain in the ICU. And I looked at my husband, and he looked at me, and he goes, can I? And I said, no. You cannot. And I'm like, but how can you say that?
Yeah.
You know, you can't have another one like what is laying in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so you don't give up. You fight that fight. That is why God gave you that child.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is how I look at things. It may look like you're at the end of your rope, but there's always the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
You just may not see it yet.
To me, it's crazy because there's things that I've gone through in life, and at the time you're like, man, this stinks to go through it, and then later on you realize, oh, I can help someone because I've been in their position, and stories like y'all's. I sit there and think there's so many people out there that I could sit there all I want to and try to help them, but it's not a situation I've been in yet. When you guys have been there, you can say, no, we've been in these positions. We have lived in the hospitals. It helps you relate to people and help them because you know the situation they're in, the problems they are facing. And to me, it's awesome when people use these things they've gone through and they can turn it into a way to help those out there who are going where they have been and all. So
it is. And before COVID, we could talk to other parents. We didn't have to keep the door closed. We didn't have to hide behind the curtain or the mask. You could go out and talk to parents. And social media is great that way because our hospital has a thing now where we can get on the group and go talk to a parent that has a child that is going through something similar to what Dakota has, because not all heart kids are the same.
Yeah.
And that I caught myself the other day thinking, why is my son going through this? Why can't, why? This heart kiddo is playing sports, and the doctor won't let Dakota play sports, because we asked. But then I look at it and I go, but I'm also that parent that can go to bed at night going, oh, my kid's at home. They're not out in a car.
Yeah.
They're not drinking. I don't have that worry, but then I have that worry of, oh, is he okay? Is he still breathing? I mean, he's 20 years old and we still have a baby monitor so we can hear him breathing at night. and I can hear him turn over in his bed because his bed creaks, and that's not by, we didn't have that all happen. It's just the mattress creaks when he turns over and it's a brand new
Yeah.
mattress, but that's how I know he's moving, Or if we get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, my husband will stop and check on him. Or if Dakota wakes up, he always says, "Mom, I'm awake." And I'm like, "Okay." So, I get up and see if he needs something. Or he'll say, "No, but you can tuck me back in." I'm like, "Well, okay, I can do that."
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. We to wrap up, we've been asking all of our guests this year, what's their favorite NASCAR paint scheme of all time. So I know it's a tough question when you look at the thousands of cars that have been on the track. But can you narrow it down to you and Dakotas? Do y'all have that one or two paint schemes that just stand out as just y'all's favorite?
Oh, let's see. Well, I know my favorite paint scheme would be Kyle's hazelnut car. And I think maybe Dakota's might be the electric interstate car.
Oh, yeah.
Am I right, buddy? Yes, he's telling me yes, that green electric interstate car. But that hazelnut blue, oh my goodness, that car was my favorite. And I told Dakota, I said, if they make a shirt, you're so getting it. Well, lo and behold, they made a shirt. Dakota has it. But that car, I wish they would run it again, but of course not. But he absolutely loves, I know, he's like, "Mommy, he runs what his sponsors tell him." So see, that's what I get. Because I told him, I said, "Well, guess what they're running at Pocono?" I'm like, "They're running the yellow Emmy." He's like, "Good, I like that one too, because why couldn't it be the electric green?" I'm like, "I don't know. Remember, they run what their sponsors tell us."
Well, I think that's one thing is one day whenever Kyle retires, there's going to be so many people that go back and they can appreciate these paint schemes, because I think there's so many people that, it's kind of like Jimmy Johnson. So until he retired, there were so many haters out there. And I feel like one day, once Kyle is finished beating all of their drivers, people can go back and start admitting, like, okay, he's a pretty good driver, and he had some pretty awesome paint schemes out there.
And he was just like a Dale Earnhardt. I mean, everybody hated him. And then when he died, they were like, "Oh my gosh, he was like awesome. I really liked him." I'm like, "Did you jump on the bandwagon when he died?
Yeah.
Or did you like him the whole time?"
Yeah.
But yeah, totally agree with that. If Kyle, whenever he retires, there's going to be a ton on his bandwagon. And it's just funny because when you go to the racetrack, you hear it. He sucks, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, really? And then if he beats your driver, and then you're really going to be mad. But then 20 years down the road, you're going to be praising him because he was so awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
He's done something that nobody else has done. He's won at every track. I mean, he hasn't won the 500, but he's won at Daytona.
Yeah.
But the night he won at the 600, we were there. And to be in the victory lane, I mean, we got our picture taken with him. We met Joe Gibbs again that year. And, I mean, it was just perfect. And then when Truex won, we were in the winner's circle that year, too. And we met Truex. And the first words out of the man's mouth was, "Can someone get me a sandwich? I'm hungry." He's like, that was a long race. But, I mean, people, like we always say, haters are going to hate.
I got you. Well, Denise, once again, I thank you so much for joining us and sharing Dakota's story with us. I really appreciate it. I know the listeners are probably enjoying listening to this story. So just thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. Anytime.